What's going on, guys? Coach Derek here, and today we're going to be going over how to assemble and string the new Gait Faceoff Head, so stay tuned. Okay, to start, before we even get into stringing this thing, I like to string my sticks preferably when they're on the stick. It just makes it a little bit easier. So let's get into how to set this thing up actually. The shaft that I'm going to be using is the Gait GSX 5.7. This is the version that I got with the prototype. Thank you, shout out TD Erlin. I have tried it with the side tie before, but I think this is going to be the preferred shaft you want to use. So just a little tip there. To put this thing on, we have a couple of elements and 3 different screws that we're going to be using here. The first thing is there's this rubber kind of stop around the throat plug, and you want to keep that on. Do not take it off, because this is going to help it fit snugly in the shaft and make sure that it doesn't pop off or break the shaft as a whole. Okay, so we're going to just toss that guy in here, try to slam it down a little bit, and we're good. We got that on the shaft. Okay, the first screw that we're actually going to put in is going to be the big screw. This is going to go directly into the throat, and you should, when you do get this head, you shouldn't have a ball stop on it. It should come without the ball stop. You can install the ball stop afterwards, but this screw is actually going to go straight in here, and then you're going to screw that in. All right, once you have that screwed in all the way down, you're then going to take the 2 smaller screws and put them in the front and back. So that smaller of the 2 is actually going to go in the front, and then the bigger of the 2 is going to go in the back. So I'm putting the small one in right now. And then the larger of the 2 is going to go in the back of the throat. All right, once you have all 3 screws in, you're gonna be ready to put the ball stop in and string it. I do recommend that you use actually all 3 screws, just so you have no variability with the wiggle in the head or it actually breaking your shaft because of the amount of force that is gonna be used with the throat plug versus it gripping onto the stick. So I do recommend all 3 screws being put in, and then I do not have the ball stop. I misplaced the ball stop, but you can toss that puppy on right here. With or without it, doesn't really matter in my opinion, but now let's get this thing strung up. Okay, so for stringing materials, I actually use String King 4S mesh. I'm gonna be using black today, and then I have a couple Sidewall that you're gonna need, and I also recommend having a lighter and a pair of scissors handy so you can cut and burn the strings after you're done stringing it. All right, we're gonna start with the top string, okay? This head is a little bit different, having 8 top holes, all relatively close. Gait has always made their heads like this, so I like it because you can utilize all 8 holes. Today we're just gonna be using 4, I believe, but I'll show you guys how that's done. Okay, so the first part of stringing this here, we need to get our mesh ready to go, okay? When you're stringing a stick, you gotta stretch out the mesh a little bit just because it is packaged and pretty tight. So we wanna take the mesh and we're basically just separating it, giving it a couple tugs all the way down the mesh until it's a little bit stretched out so it's ready to be strung into our stick. The next little tip I have is we are gonna go on the 9 diamond row. I just think that's the best. And then make sure you have the right side of the mesh facing the back of the head. So the part that's a little bit more rough, that's gonna be on the inside of your head, and then the slippery part is gonna be on the outside, just so you have more grip. Okay, we're gonna find the 9 diamond row, and then we're gonna fold that mesh over here. All right, now we're gonna start with the top sidewall. I have my sidewall here. I like to start by making a double loop, or a double knot. So we're gonna loop it, and then we're just gonna put the end through twice, pull, and you have a nice knot that's not gonna slide, not gonna slide through the sidewall hole, Okay, next we need to get the mesh on the head. So for this head, I'm gonna put 1, 2, 3. On that third one, I'm gonna go down through, all right? And then I'm gonna go up through the mesh, okay? Just like that. And since these sidewall holes are a little bit smaller, I'm gonna go back up to that second one, go through again, and then up through the mesh again, and that's gonna create our loop, tying down the mesh to the head. If I can tighten it a little bit. All right, so you should have something like that. Like I said, the top sidewall is pretty different for gate heads, having 8 sidewall holes. The way we're gonna string this is we're gonna go every other, starting with the first one. So we're gonna go double interlock here, skip, double interlock, skip, skip, double interlock, tie off, okay? I'll walk you guys through that real quick. Start, we're going through that first sidewall hole, okay, down through it to the top of the head, and you should have this loop here. Next, you're gonna go up through the very next mesh hole and pull it, and when you pull it tight, you should get an interlock, something that looks like that. Now we wanna try and make this as tight as possible, because the tighter your top sidewall, the stronger foundation you have for your actual pocket. Next, for the double interlock, we're gonna go down through the mesh, all right? And then we're coming back up the front through that same top sidewall hole, okay? And then there's gonna be this loop here, and then we're going down through the loop, okay? And when I pull that tight, I should get something like that. Now I'm just gonna tighten that up a little bit. All right, next we're skipping this next mesh hole, skipping the sidewall hole, and going to that next sidewall hole here. Down, through the sidewall hole, up through that next mesh hole, and you got your interlock. Going back down, my fat ass hands are in the way, down through the mesh. Make sure you have that loop. Back up through the front of the head, and then pulling that all the way through for your double interlock. All right, next I'm gonna skip to, do this one, okay, down through that sidewall hole, skip the mesh hole, right? We're on the 9 diamond, so that one should be in the center of the head. Okay, going up through the mesh. If I can get this sucker through. All right, and through that loop. Just rinse and repeat, and then down through the mesh, up through the sidewall, and boom. All right, I'm gonna do the last one here on that very last hole right here. All right, down through the sidewall, up through the mesh after we skipped one, right? Creating that interlock, down through the mesh, up through the sidewall, and down through the loop. Working on keeping that tight so we can make sure that it's nice and even. All right, next, to finish the tie off, we wanna go down through the mesh, out towards us, through that second sidewall hole, and then loop it around that third. So we're gonna go down through the mesh, out through that sidewall hole. Come on, you're right there. All right, so it's gonna be here. Then we're going back down through the mesh. Try to go under the sidewall on that bottom side of the sidewall. Come on. And then we're gonna go out the third hole, just because these holes are a little bit smaller. Okay, and then we're gonna get here. All right, we're trying to lock that down as tight as possible. So we got our our loop. All right, to tie off, what I like to do is I like to make a loop here and then twist it. Okay, so it's in front, right? The sidewall's in front here. Let me try to show that on camera. Okay, and then we're going through that loop twice. All right, and we're trying to keep these two loops as close to the head as possible. So it should be here like that. And then we're pressing down on it and pulling through. And that's gonna create your knot for the tie off. All right, so now we got the top sidewall done. Let's get in to the actual sidewall in the pocket. All right, so for this, the head's a little difficult to string in terms of the spacing and stuff for the sidewall, but that's not gonna be a problem, okay? I already have my sidewall with the knots done, all right? I'm gonna walk you guys through this. So we need to loop around this first mesh hole, okay? So I'm gonna skip 2 holes, go up through, and then that next sidewall hole I'm going in again, and then up through, and that's gonna create my loop. All right, I like to string one sidewall at a time, but I do start the loops at the same time. That's the one thing. So, let me get that here. All right, now we have our loops and we're ready to do the sidewall. So for this sidewall, I like to go knots and then modified SIs, okay? How we're gonna accomplish this is we're gonna skip 3 mesh holes, or sidewall holes, excuse me, go in through the sidewall first, up through the very next mesh hole. You don't wanna skip mesh holes for the actual sidewall. Okay, now we have our loop here. Everybody sees that? We're going down through the loop on the top side, all right? And when we pull that tight, it's gonna create a knot. You guys see that? And then we're just gonna pull that nice and tight. Imagine these as like the anchor points, and that's what's gonna hold your pocket in place. So it's gonna be a knot just like that. Next, we're gonna skip 1 and do the same thing. Up through, in through the sidewall, up through the mesh. Okay, we got our loop. We're going down and over to create our knot. Little tip, I like to pull it tight all the way from the sidewall. Hold my thumb down here, and then when I pull that all the way down, it creates the knot. We're gonna do one more. All right, we're gonna skip another sidewall hole, in through the sidewall, up through the mesh. Okay, again, we're going down over the top of the loop for this knotted interlock. Pull that sidewall tight, and then pull it down for our 3rd knot. All right, here's where it's gonna get tricky. So for this head, I'm actually gonna use a stacked SI. What we're gonna do is instead of going through the sidewall, we're going down through the mesh. All right, the very next mesh hole. Gonna go down through the other mesh hole. Okay, and since this is gonna be a modified SI, we're gonna skip a sidewall hole going down, and then we're gonna come back out the mesh hole on top. Okay, and that's gonna create a little bit of a loop. So from here, we can pull that tight, but we need to go back up both mesh holes on the outside. So we're going up here, and then that second mesh hole that we went down through, we're going up again, like so. And then we're gonna pull that nice and tight and down, and the mesh should be sitting on top of each other, like so, for a stacked SI. And that's where we're gonna really start to get our pocket. Okay, next, we're gonna do another SI, just one. Down through the mesh, in through the sidewall, out through the same sidewall, or the one above, I should say. Okay, like so. And then we're going up through the mesh, and boom. You got yourself a modified SI. That's gonna keep the mesh on the outside of the head so that when you're facing off, the sidewall doesn't roll in and then your stick becomes illegal. All right, just rinse and repeat. For the next one, modified SI again. And you should start looking something like that. Okay, now for these last two kind of sections on the head where they're more circular, I'm just gonna do a regular interlock. So we're gonna go in through the sidewall, up through the mesh, and instead of going on top of the loop, we're just gonna go straight through the loop. And that's gonna create your interlock. All right, we're gonna do the same exact thing for the next one. Skip a mesh hole or a sidewall hole, skip a sidewall hole, in through the sidewall hole, up through the mesh, and then down through for another interlock. It's gonna be there like so. Okay, and then from here, I'm just gonna go through the very next sidewall hole, which is gonna be on the 10 diamond row. And I am going to loop through that twice. Out through the inside of the sidewall. So we have a little loop guy right there. And then we're gonna tie off. Now at any point in the video, if you're confused or don't know about these kind of knots that I'm tying, you can just individually go on YouTube and search them. So like SIs, interlocks, knotted interlocks, all that stuff. And they can give, there's tutorials on there on that specific knot. But if you're a little bit more experienced with stringing, this will make all sense to you. But yeah, I'm just gonna, you guys, like I said, you can pause the video to watch what I'm doing and even drop a comment if you're confused about anything, and I'll get back to you right away. But I'm just gonna string the other sidewall here because it's literally copy and paste. You're doing the same exact thing on this as you did on this side. Do a little time lapse and then I'll show you the final result. And there you have it. She's all strung up, decent pocket, solid channel. It's definitely more of a mid pocket. The way the head is, how it's like the throat's like pretty long, it makes it a little difficult. That's why I do that stacked SI to make sure we get a nice, like decent channel. Because the head, when the head like pinches, it's only gonna make the channel tighter. So we don't want that channel to be too tight, especially for face-off heads, okay? Now let's toss the bottom string in and the shooters, and then we're good to go. For bottom strings in general, I like to use shooters. It's just easier on the mesh and it doesn't rip the mesh. Where we're gonna do it is where we looped off on that row. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna go down through. So right here is where we tied off. We're gonna skip a mesh hole and then go down through there with both aglets on the shooter. So we'll go through there, and then on the opposite side, same thing. Skip a mesh hole and go down through there. So it's gonna be kind of hard for me to film this for you guys, but we're going down both. All right. And then we have something like this. Focus, come on. And then I like to loop my stuff around. So that's why I left that bottom sidewall hole open, so I can go around through that. So I'm going out that bottom sidewall hole and then going down through the bottom sidewall hole. So it's gonna give me a little loop-de-loop. And finish with something like that. And then we just tie a square knot, which is super simple. Crossing over, going through, and then crossing again, and going through. Just a regular knot. Okay? It should end with something like that. Next, we're just gonna toss these shooters in here just because I don't think it has this is gonna have the best channel, so I want a little bit more feel for it instead of it just clicking off the top. We're gonna be using red shooters because red is my favorite color. But essentially with shooters is you're just picking a side and crossing them through every mesh hole. So I'm gonna start with the second or third row, I should say. I position each aglet one on top of the other. So for that first mesh hole, I'm going outside on top, inside under, and pulling through. And then we're just repeating that all the way through, making sure that we're going nice and steady. We're not trying to rush this. But on top on the outside, underneath on the inside. So like the side towards you versus the side towards facing away from you. You're just alternating every single time. And then for this last little bit, I do try to go up through like the sidewall. So it gets there like that. And then we're just tying off with a square knot again. So we're going here, and then one more here, okay? All right, and then I'm gonna put another one in. Not too tight. The tighter your shooter is, the more whip your stick is gonna have. So I like to do mine like fairly loose. But I'm gonna skip a sidewall hole and then do the same exact thing. And then finish off with the square knot. All right, so there my shooters are on. I'm gonna trim them up and make sure you burn the ends or else they'll fray. All right, awesome. So now that I got that burned up, I am gonna put a shooting cord in, okay? This is a little bit thinner than sidewall, so this is just gonna help prevent the ball from rolling off the top. And same thing, we're just alternating directions. And then we just tie that puppy off. And we are good to go. And there you have it. That is how to assemble and string the new Gait Faceoff Head. If you guys enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Follow me on Instagram for everything face-off related. I have drills, tips, coaching clips, as well as live face-offs if you guys are interested. And I will be coming out with a review on this thing here shortly. Other than that, hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.